The fluorescent lights hummed their tired song above me, casting everything in the diner with a sickly yellow glow that made even the freshest coffee look old. My feet screamed inside my worn sneakers. The left one had a hole near the toe that I'd covered with duct tape 3 days ago. The tape was peeling now, and I could feel the cold seeping through with each step across the black and white checkered floor. It was 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes until my shift ended. 13 minutes until I could finally sit down. "Sophia, table 7 needs a refill." Marge's voice cut through the clatter of dishes like a knife. She didn't look up from the register, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she counted the day's receipts for the 3rd time. "On it," I called back, grabbing the coffee pot with hands that trembled slightly from exhaustion. I'd been on my feet for 9 hours straight, covering for Jenny, who'd called in sick again. That made it the 4th time this month, but I couldn't complain. I needed the extra hours. The rent was due in 5 days, and I was still $60 short. The diner smelled like grease and burnt toast, mixed with the cheap pine cleaner we used to mop the floors. It was the smell of survival, of making ends meet, of invisible people like me serving other invisible people at midnight in a neighborhood where no one asked too many questions. I moved through the narrow aisle between the booths, my body operating on autopilot. The coffee pot was heavy, and my wrist ached from holding trays all day. Table 7 was occupied by a truck driver I recognized. He came in every Tuesday night, always ordered the same thing, always left exactly $2 as a tip. As I approached to refill his cup, the bell above the entrance chimed. I didn't look up immediately. The bell chimed constantly, and most customers could wait 30 seconds while I finished what I was doing. But something made me glance toward the door anyway. Maybe it was the way the air seemed to shift, or how the usual din of conversation dropped by a decibel. 3 men walked in. No, 2 men walked in, flanking a third who didn't walk so much as glide. The first thing I noticed was the silence that followed them like a wake. The second thing was the suits, expensive, perfectly tailored, the kind that cost more than I made in 6 months. The 2 flanking men were broad-shouldered and alert, their eyes scanning the diner with the practiced efficiency of security personnel or bodyguards. But it was the man in the center who made my breath catch. He was tall, with dark hair styled with deliberate casualness, touched with silver at the temples that only made him more striking. His face was all sharp angles and controlled power, a jaw that could have been carved from marble, lips pressed into a line that suggested he rarely smiled. His suit was charcoal gray, his shirt so white it almost hurt to look at, and as he moved, I caught the glint of expensive cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. He didn't belong here. None of them did. The scent reached me even from across the room. Something woody and expensive. Cologne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. It cut through the grease and pine cleaner like a blade through butter. "Sophia, you gonna pour that coffee or just hold it?" The truck driver's voice snapped me back to reality. My hands shook as I poured, and I nearly overfilled his cup. "Sorry," I mumbled, setting the pot down and grabbing a rag to wipe the small spill. When I straightened, I found myself looking directly at the man in the center. He'd chosen a booth, the corner one with the ripped vinyl seat that we kept meaning to repair. His 2 companions remained standing, one near the door, one near the booth, their positions strategic, protective. His eyes met mine, and I felt it like a physical touch. They were dark, so dark they were almost black, and they held an intensity that made my pulse stutter. He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge me beyond that single searing look. Then his gaze moved on, dismissing me as easily as he'd noticed me. I was invisible again. "I'll take their order," Marge whispered, suddenly beside me. Her voice was tight, and when I glanced at her, I saw something I'd never seen before. "Fear, you go clean, table 4, but it's my section. Now, Sophia." Her hand gripped my elbow, surprisingly strong. "Trust me on this." I wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped me. Marge had owned this diner for 23 years. She'd seen things, survived things in this neighborhood. If she was scared, there was a reason. So I went to table 4, cleared away abandoned plates, and tried not to watch the corner booth. Tried and failed. Marge approached them with her order pad, her usual confident swagger replaced by something careful, almost deferential. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw her nod, write something down, hurry back toward the kitchen without meeting anyone's eyes. The next 20 minutes crawled by. The three men sat in that booth, and the entire diner seemed to revolve around them like planets around a dark star. Conversations continued, but quieter. People ate their meals faster, paid their bills, left. By the time Marge brought out their order, 3 coffees, nothing else, we were down to half our usual midnight crowd. I was wiping down table 9 when I heard it. The screech of tires, the horrible crunch of metal on metal, the scream. Everyone rushed to the windows. Outside, under the flickering streetlight, a car had jumped the curb and slammed into a lamppost, but it was the small figure lying motionless on the sidewalk that made my heart stop. A child. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing pajamas covered in cartoon characters. I didn't think. My body moved before my brain could catch up. The diner door slammed open as I ran outside, my feet pounding against the cold pavement. Behind me, I heard shouting, but it was distant, underwater. The boy wasn't breathing. I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands already moving through the motions I'd learned years ago in a CPR class I'd taken at the community center. Check for consciousness. Check for breathing. Start compressions. "Someone call 911, I screamed. But my eyes never left the boy's pale face. His skin was cold. Too cold. My hands pressed against his small chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Counting in my head, trying to remember the rhythm. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on, baby, breathe." The world narrowed to just this. The feel of his ribs under my palms, the desperate hope that I wasn't too late, the prayer I didn't know I was making. Then I felt it. Hands grabbing my shoulders, trying to pull me away. Strong hands, insistent. "No." I shook them off, continuing compressions. "He's not breathing." "Miss, step back." A deep voice, authoritative. "I'm not stopping until—" The boy coughed. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. He coughed, gasped, and then his eyes fluttered open, confused, scared, but alive. Alive. I sat back on my heels, my whole body shaking. My hands were trembling so badly I had to press them against my thighs. Distantly, I heard sirens approaching. "You saved him." The voice came from behind me, and when I turned, I found myself looking up into those dark, intense eyes. The man from the booth was crouched beside me now, close enough that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. Close enough to smell that expensive cologne mixed with something else. Cigarette smoke, leather, danger. He wasn't breathing. My voice cracked, and suddenly I was crying, hot tears streaming down my face as the adrenaline crashed through my system. "You saved my son." His voice was softer now, but no less intense. He reached out, and his hand cupped my face with shocking gentleness, his thumb brushing away a tear. His skin was warm, his touch careful, as if I might break. His son. The boy was his son. "Sir, we need to check him." One of the bodyguards approached, but the man, the father, held up a hand without looking away from me. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia." It came out as barely a whisper. "Sophia Torres. Sophia." He repeated it like a prayer, like something precious. His hand was still on my face, and I knew I should pull away, but I couldn't move. I owe you a debt I can never repay. The ambulance arrived then, paramedics rushing toward us. The moment broke. His hand fell away from my face, and he stood, his attention shifting to his son. I watched as he scooped the boy into his arms with a tenderness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. The expensive suit, the bodyguards, the aura of controlled violence that surrounded him like armor. The paramedics tried to take the boy, but he wouldn't let go of his father, small hands clutching at that perfect suit with fingers that left dirty smudges on the pristine fabric. The man didn't seem to care. He climbed into the ambulance, still holding his son, and one of the bodyguards followed. The other bodyguard approached me. He was massive, with a shaved head and a scar running down his left cheek. He reached into his jacket. I flinched and pulled out a business card. "Mr. Constantine will want to thank you properly," he said, his accent thick, Eastern European. "You call this number tomorrow. Whatever you need. Hospital bills, time off work. You call." I took the card with numb fingers. It was heavy cardstock, Expensive, with a single phone number embossed in black. No name, no company, just the number. I didn't do it for money, I stammered. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. We know. That's why he'll want to thank you. Then he was gone, climbing into a black Mercedes that I hadn't even noticed parked across the street. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, and the Mercedes followed. I stood there on the cold sidewalk, still shaking, still crying, the expensive business card clutched in my hand like a lifeline, or a death sentence. When I finally walked back into the diner, Marge was waiting. Her face was white. Do you know who that was? She asked. I shook my head. Dmitri Konstantin. She said the name like it explained everything. When I just stared at her blankly, she grabbed my shoulders. The Konstantin family, Sophia. They run everything south of 5th Street. Everything. You just saved the son of the most dangerous man in the city. The card felt heavy in my pocket. Suddenly, the hole in my shoe and the $60 I needed for rent seemed very far away. I'd saved a life tonight, but looking at the fear in Marge's eyes, I wondered if I'd just destroyed my own. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in my studio apartment, staring at the business card until the numbers blurred together. The radiator clanked and hissed in the corner, barely putting out enough heat to fight the January cold seeping through the single-pane window. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime symphony. Distant sirens, car horns, the occasional shout from the street below. My hands had finally stopped shaking around 3 a.m., but my mind wouldn't quiet. Dmitri Konstantin. The name meant nothing to me yesterday. Now it felt burned into my consciousness, along with the memory of those dark eyes looking at me like I was something precious, something valuable. I'd seen dangerous men before. You didn't grow up in this neighborhood without learning to recognize the signs. The ones who carried themselves with casual violence, who expected deference, who took what they wanted. I'd learned young to make myself small, invisible, to avoid their attention at all costs. But Dmitri Konstantin was something else entirely. He didn't demand attention. He commanded it simply by existing. And for one brief, terrifying moment, I'd had all of his attention focused solely on me. You saved my son. His voice echoed in my memory, low and rough with emotion I hadn't expected. The way his hand had cupped my face, so gentle despite the calluses I'd felt on his palm. The way he'd looked at me like I'd given him something more valuable than money could buy. I should throw the card away, delete it from existence, pretend last night never happened. Instead, I tucked it into my wallet, into the small pocket where I kept my mother's photo. The only picture I had of her, faded and creased from years of carrying it with me. When dawn finally broke, gray and reluctant, I got ready for my morning shift. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked haunted. Dark circles under my eyes, skin pale, lips still chapped from the cold. I splashed water on my face, pulled my dark hair into a ponytail, and put on my uniform. Black pants, white button-down shirt, the name tag that read, Sophia, in cheerful red letters. My phone buzzed as I was lacing up my sneakers. A text from Marge. Take the day off. Paid. Don't argue. I stared at the message. Marge had never given me a paid day off in the 3 years I'd worked for her. Never. My fingers hovered over the screen, ready to argue anyway. I needed the hours. But another text came through. Please, Sophia. Just for today. Let things settle. Let things settle. As if last night was a storm that just needed to pass, rather than an earthquake that had shifted the foundation of my small, careful life. I texted back a simple okay and sat down on my bed, suddenly unsure what to do with unexpected free time. The rent was still due in 4 days. I was still $60 short, but the thought of going to the diner, of facing the questions and stares and whispers, made my stomach turn. By noon, I'd cleaned my apartment twice, done laundry in the building's basement machines, and reorganized my tiny pantry. Anything to keep my hands busy, my mind occupied. I was folding my last clean towel when someone knocked on my door, not the buzzer downstairs, which meant someone had gotten past the building's front door, past the broken lock that the landlord kept promising to fix. A direct knock on my apartment door, 4th floor, Unit 4C. My heart climbed into my throat. Through the peephole, I saw a woman. She was perhaps 60, with steel-gray hair pulled into an elegant twist, wearing a camel-colored coat that looked impossibly soft. Her face was kind but serious, and she carried a leather folder under one arm. "Miss Torres?" Her voice was cultured, accented, the same Eastern European lilt as the bodyguard from last night. "My name is Galina Volkov. I work for Mr. Constantine. May I speak with you?" Every instinct screamed at me to pretend I wasn't home, but she'd already seen my shadow through the peephole, and something told me that Galina Volkov was not a woman who could be easily dismissed. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. "How did you get up here?" "I have my ways." Her smile was slight. "I mean you no harm, Miss Torres. I'm here to deliver something and to extend an invitation. May I come in? I assure you I'm quite harmless. Ask any of your neighbors. I introduced myself to Mrs. Chen on the second floor. Lovely woman. She told me about her grandson. Despite everything, I found myself unhooking the chain and opening the door." Galina stepped inside with the grace of someone accustomed to much nicer surroundings, but her face showed no judgment as she took in my humble studio. The threadbare couch I'd found on the street and reupholstered myself, the kitchenette with its ancient appliances, the bed in the corner with its faded quilt. "Please sit," I said, gesturing to the couch, suddenly mortified by the contrast between her obvious wealth and my poverty. She sat, setting her leather folder on the coffee table, a piece of plywood balanced on milk crates that I'd covered with a tablecloth. "First, let me thank you on behalf of the entire Constantine family for what you did last night. Alexei is Mr. Constantine's only child, his most precious treasure. You gave him back his son's life." Alexei. The little boy had a name now, an identity beyond the pale face and cartoon pajamas. "How is he?" I asked, sitting in the mismatched armchair across from her. "Recovering well, thanks to you. The doctor said if you hadn't acted so quickly." She paused, and I saw genuine emotion flicker across her composed features. "You saved him, Miss Torres, and the Constantine family does not forget its debts." She opened the leather folder and withdrew an envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper, sealed with what looked like actual wax. She set it on the table between us. "This is for you, Mr. Constantine wanted to ensure you were compensated for missing work and for any expenses you might have incurred. I didn't touch the envelope. I didn't do it for money. We know." Galina's smile was warmer now, which is precisely why Mr. Constantine insists. "Please, Miss Torres, open it." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and withdrew a check. My eyes went to the amount, and the world tilted. $50,000. I can't. My voice came out strangled. "This is too much. It's what his son's life is worth to him," Galina said firmly. "And honestly, Miss Torres, it's insultingly little, but Mr. Constantine thought a larger amount might frighten you." I stared at the check, at the elegant signature at the bottom. Dmitri Constantine. The same handwriting that had probably signed God knows what other documents, business contracts, orders, perhaps even death warrants. "There's more," Galina continued. "Mr. Constantine would like to invite you to dinner tomorrow evening, to thank you properly, in person. Alexei has been asking about the angel lady who saved him. He wants to thank you as well. I don't think that's a good idea." I set the check down like it might burn me. "I'm just a waitress. I don't belong in his world. You saved his son's life. That makes you more important to him than most people in his world." Galina's eyes were sharp, assessing. "But I understand your hesitation. The Constantine name carries weight and fear, but Dmitri is not the monster people whisper about, Miss Torres. He's a father who almost lost his child. He's a man who wants to say thank you to the woman who gave him a miracle." She stood, smoothing down her coat. "Think about it. The dinner will be at his home, private, just family. 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. A car will come for you at 5:30, whether you've decided or not. If you choose not to attend, the driver will leave. No pressure, no obligation." At the door, she paused. "One more thing. That check, cash it or don't. That's your choice. But know that refusing it won't change what you did, or what Mr. Constantine feels he owes you. Some debts can't be erased by pride." Then she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and the envelope on my coffee table, glowing like a small sun in my dim apartment. I picked up the check again, my hands shaking. $50,000. I could pay rent for years, buy new shoes without holes, stop working double shifts, maybe even go back to school like I'd always dreamed. But there was no such thing as free money, especially not from men like Dmitri Konstantin. I thought about his hand on my face, the intensity in his eyes, the way he'd said my name like he was memorizing it. I thought about the little boy, Alexei, clutching his father's suit with dirty hands, and how Dmitri hadn't cared about the expensive fabric, only about his son being alive. I thought about the bodyguards, the Mercedes, the fear in Marge's eyes, and I thought about how, for one moment last night, I hadn't been invisible. The next day and a half passed in a fog of indecision. I went to work. Marge tried to send me home again, but I refused and endured the stares and whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. Everyone knew what had happened. In a neighborhood like this, news traveled faster than light. Some people looked at me with respect, others with fear, as if I'd been contaminated by proximity to danger. A few avoided me entirely. I hadn't cashed the check. It sat in my wallet next to my mother's photo, both pieces of paper representing impossible things. Love I'd lost, wealth I'd never imagined. By 5:15 p.m., the following evening, I was pacing my apartment in the only nice outfit I owned, a navy blue dress I'd bought from a thrift store for a job interview years ago. It was simple, modest, slightly too big in the shoulders. I'd paired it with my least worn flats and attempted to do something with my hair beyond a ponytail. The result was still obviously cheap, obviously borrowed from a life that wasn't mine. But it was the best I could do. At 5:28 p.m., I stood at my window and watched a Rolls-Royce pull up to the curb below. It was midnight blue, gleaming under the streetlights, so out of place on this broken street that it might as well have been a spaceship. A driver emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit and cap. He looked up at my building, patient, unhurried. I had 2 minutes to decide. The check in my wallet seemed to burn against my skin. The memory of Dmitri's eyes, of his gentle touch, of his son's pale face coming back to life under my hands, all of it swirled together into a momentum I couldn't fight. I grabbed my coat, threadbare, patched at the elbows, and headed downstairs before I could change my mind. The driver opened the door as I approached. He was the same bodyguard from the hospital, the one with the scar. Up close, he was even more intimidating. "Miss Torres," he said, with a small nod that might have been respect. "I'm Victor. Mr. Konstantin sent me to escort you." The interior of the Rolls-Royce was another world entirely. Leather seats soft as butter, warm air that smelled faintly of cedar, tinted windows that made the streets outside look like a different city. There was even a small bar, bottles of expensive liquor secured in custom holders. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, afraid to touch anything. As Victor pulled away from the curb, I watched my building disappear in the side mirror, the cracked steps, the graffitied walls, the life I'd always known shrinking into the distance. I was driving toward Dmitri Konstantin's home, toward his world, toward the most dangerous man in the city who looked at me like I'd given him everything that mattered, and I had absolutely no idea if I'd made the right choice or a fatal mistake. The city transformed as we drove. The crumbling buildings and potholed streets of my neighborhood gave way to tree-lined avenues, then to gated communities with manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a year. Victor drove in silence, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror. Not to look at me, I realized, but to check if we were being followed. The thought sent ice down my spine. We drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city entirely. The houses grew larger, farther apart, hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Old money lived out here, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. And apparently, new money too. The dangerous kind that bought its way in with cash and fear. Victor turned down a private road, stopped at a gate that opened silently at our approach. The driveway beyond was lined with lights, winding through landscaped gardens still green despite the January cold. Then the house came into view, and my breath caught. It wasn't ostentatious, no gold columns or marble statues. But it was massive, all clean lines and modern architecture. Glass and stone blended into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Warm light glowed from the windows, making it seem almost welcoming. Almost. Victor opened my door, and the cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and something flowering that shouldn't bloom in winter. My legs felt unsteady as I stepped out onto pristine pavement. "This way, Miss Torres." Victor gestured toward the entrance, where another man in a suit stood waiting. More security, I realized. How many people did Dmitri Konstantin employ just to keep himself safe? The front door opened before we reached it. A woman stood there, Galina, wearing an elegant black dress that made my thrift store outfit feel even more inadequate. But her smile was warm, genuine, as she reached out to take my hand. "Sophia, I'm so glad you came. Mr. Konstantin is with Alexei, but they'll be down shortly. Come, let me take your coat." I shrugged out of my patched coat, watching as Galina handed it to yet another staff member without a flicker of judgment. The interior of the house was breathtaking. High ceilings, original art on the walls, furniture that looked both expensive and actually comfortable. But it was warm, lived in. I could see a child's drawing stuck to the refrigerator visible through the doorway to what must be the kitchen. A pair of small sneakers kicked off near the stairs. A home, not just a house. The realization surprised me. "Nervous?" Galina asked kindly, guiding me toward what looked like a sitting room. "Terrified," I admitted, then immediately regretted my honesty. She laughed, a rich sound that eased some of the tension in my chest. "Good. That means you're smart. But you don't need to be frightened, not here. You're a guest, and... Papa, she's here. The angel lady is here." The small voice came from the stairs, high-pitched with excitement. I turned and saw him, Alexei, very much alive, barreling down the stairs in flannel pajamas covered in rockets and planets. His dark hair was messy, his face flushed with health and enthusiasm. Behind him, moving with controlled urgency, was Dmitri Konstantin. He looked different than he had at the diner. Still imposing, still powerful, but softer somehow. He wore dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie, the top button undone. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if small hands had been running through it, and his face, that stern, controlled face, was transformed by the slightest smile as he watched his son race toward me. "Alexei, slow down," he called, but there was no real command in it, only affection. The boy skidded to a stop in front of me, his dark eyes, so like his father's, wide with wonder. "You saved me," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Papa said you made my heart start again. Like magic." I knelt down so I was at his level, my own heart twisting at the sight of him healthy and happy. "Not magic," I said softly. "Just something anyone would have done." "No." Dimitri's voice closer now. I looked up to find him standing right behind his son, one hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. "Not anyone. Most people would have waited for the ambulance. You didn't hesitate." Our eyes met, and I felt it again. That intensity, that focus that made me feel like the only person in the world. He was looking at me the way he had that night, but there was something else now, something that made my pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "I'm glad he's okay," I managed, standing back up. The movement brought me closer to Dmitri, close enough to catch his scent. Different cologne tonight, something with bergamot and cedar. But underneath it, that same hint of danger, of barely controlled power. "Okay? I'm great." Alexei grabbed my hand with the unself-conscious affection of a child who'd decided I was a friend. His small hand was warm, trusting. "Papa says you're having dinner with us. Do you like chicken, Mrs. Petrov makes the best chicken, and she made cake. Chocolate cake because I asked her to. Because Papa said we have to give you whatever you want because you saved my life. Alexei." Dimitri's voice was gentle, but firm. "Let Miss Torres breathe." "It's Sophia," I said, surprising myself. "You can call me Sophia." Dimitri's eyes darkened slightly, and I realized he was pleased. "Sophia," he repeated, and the way he said my name, low, careful, like he was tasting it, sent heat through my body that had nothing to do with the warmth of the house. Dinner was surreal. We ate in a formal dining room that could have seated 20, but the table had been set for just the three of us at one end, creating an intimacy that felt both natural and impossible. Alexei sat between his father and me, chattering constantly about school, his friends, a new video game he wanted. Dmitri listened with obvious love, occasionally correcting his son's table manners with patient firmness, but mostly just watching him with an expression that made my chest ache. This was a man who would burn the world down for his child. I could see it in every glance, every protective gesture, and when he looked at me, which he did, often, with an intensity that made my skin warm, I saw something else. Gratitude, yes, but also curiosity. Interest. Papa almost never eats with me, Alexei confided, leaning toward me conspiratorially. He's always working, but he's been home every dinner since the accident. I think he's scared I'll disappear. Alexei. There was warning in Dmitri's voice now, but also truth. His jaw tightened slightly, the only sign of the emotion underneath his controlled exterior. It's okay to be scared, I said softly, looking at Dmitri rather than his son. When someone we love is in danger, fear is natural. Do you have someone you love? Alexei asked innocently. Someone you'd be scared to lose? The question hit me harder than it should have. I thought of my mother, dead for 10 years. My father, disappeared before I was born. The empty apartment waiting for me, the life built on survival rather than connection. No, I admitted, not anymore. I felt Dmitri's gaze sharpen, assessing. When I finally met his eyes, I saw understanding there and something darker. Recognition, perhaps, of a familiar loneliness. After dinner, Galina appeared to take Alexei up to bed. The boy hugged me tightly, making me promise to visit again soon, before following her up the stairs with only minor protests. And then, I was alone with Dmitri Konstantin. Come, he said, standing. Let's talk somewhere more comfortable. He led me to a study, all dark wood and leather, bookshelves lining the walls, a fire crackling in the fireplace. Through the windows, I could see the grounds lit by subtle landscape lighting, extending into darkness. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, handed me one. Our fingers brushed, and I felt the contact like electricity. Whiskey, he said, aged 20 years. I don't drink often, but tonight feels like an occasion worth marking. I took a tentative sip. It burned going down, but left a warm, smooth finish. Expensive, like everything else in this house. Dmitri sat in one of the leather chairs, gestured for me to take the other. The fire cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles, the controlled strength. He'd rolled his sleeves up further, and I could see his forearms, muscular, with faded scars that told stories I probably didn't want to know. You didn't cash the check, he said. It wasn't a question. I can't accept that much money. Why not? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the whiskey glass dangling from his fingers. You earned it. More than earned it. I didn't do it for payment. I did it because a child was dying. I met his eyes, refusing to back down despite the intensity of his stare. If I take that money, it changes what happened, makes it a transaction instead of just the right thing to do. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. The fire crackled. Outside, I heard the distant sound of the gate opening and closing. Security patrols, probably. You're not what I expected, he finally said. What did you expect? Someone who would take the money without question, who would maybe ask for more, who would see an opportunity and seize it. He took a drink of whiskey, and I watched his throat work as he swallowed. Everyone wants something from me, Sophia. Everyone has an angle, a price, a scheme. But you kneel in the cold to save my son's life. And then you refuse payment. You're either incredibly noble or incredibly foolish. Maybe both, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. The whiskey was warming me from the inside. Or maybe it was the fire. Or maybe it was the way he was looking at me. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was closer than I'd seen before. You should be afraid of me. I am, I admitted. but I'm also here. Why? He set down his glass and stood, moving closer. Not threatening, but deliberate. Why did you come tonight when you could have stayed away, when staying away would have been safer, smarter? I stood too, refusing to let him tower over me even though he was nearly a foot taller. Because your son asked to see me. Because he called me his angel lady, and I couldn't disappoint a child who almost died. Just for Alexei? He was very close now, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the faint lines at their corners, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. I don't know, I whispered. Honest, despite every instinct screaming at me to lie, to protect myself. I don't know why I'm really here. His hand came up slowly, giving me time to move away. When I didn't, he cupped my face just as he had that night on the sidewalk. Gentle, careful, like I was something precious that might break. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I felt myself lean into the touch before I could stop myself. Sophia Torres, he murmured, my name a caress in his deep voice. What am I going to do with you? Before I could answer, before I could even process the question, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Dmitri stepped back smoothly, his hand falling away, his expression shifting back to controlled neutrality so quickly I almost wondered if I'd imagined the moment. Victor appeared in the doorway. Sir, you have a call. It's urgent. Dmitri's jaw tightened. I'll take it in the other room. He looked at me, and frustration flickered across his features. Sophia, I apologize. This will only take a few minutes. He left, Victor following, and I was alone in the study with my racing heart and the ghost of his touch still warming my skin. I moved to the windows, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. What was I doing? This was insane. Dmitri Konstantin wasn't just dangerous. He was lethal. A man who commanded fear with his mere presence, who had security teams and urgent calls in the middle of dinner parties, who lived behind gates and walls for reasons I was probably better off not knowing. But he was also a father who loved his son fiercely, a man who'd held his dying child and looked at me like I'd given him back his reason for breathing. And when he touched me, I didn't feel invisible anymore. I was still standing at the window when I heard raised voices, muffled, coming from another room. I shouldn't eavesdrop. I should stay right here, mind my own business. But then I heard Dmitri's voice, sharp with barely controlled rage. I don't care what he wants. He stole from me, betrayed me, and now he dares to make demands? Find him. Bring him to me. I want to look him in the eyes when The sentence cut off abruptly. I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding. This was his world, not the warm house or the chocolate cake or the father reading bedtime stories. This was the reality, violence, vengeance, power, wielded without mercy. And I was standing in the middle of it, wearing a thrift store dress and cheap shoes, completely out of my depth. When Dmitri returned 5 minutes later, his face was a mask of control, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the dangerous glint in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. Business. It's unavoidable in my line of work. What exactly is your line of work? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. He looked at me for a long moment. Import and export, he finally said, which was obviously a lie. Various business interests. Nothing you need to worry about. Because I'm just a waitress who saved your son? Someone to be protected from the truth? His eyes narrowed slightly. Because you're someone I don't want to taint with the darker parts of my world. You're good, Sophia. Pure. And that's rare enough that I want to preserve it. I'm not a child, I said, my voice sharper than intended, and I'm not as pure as you think. I've seen plenty of darkness in my neighborhood. I've just never had the power to be the one causing it. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. He moved closer again, and this time there was something predatory in it. Something that made my pulse race for entirely different reasons than fear. You think you understand my world? His voice was low, dangerous. You think seeing crime in your neighborhood prepares you for what I do? For the choices I make, the things I've done? No, I admitted. But I think you're not as much of a monster as you want me to believe. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're wrong. Then why am I still here? Why not send me away? Let Victor drive me home. Forget this ever happened. I stepped closer to him, driven by something reckless and self-destructive. You could have just sent the check and been done with your debt. But instead, you invited me here. You had me meet your son. You're standing close enough to touch me but holding yourself back. Why? His control cracked just for a second. I saw it in the way his hands clenched at his sides, the way his breathing changed, because from the moment you knelt on that sidewalk to save my son, you've been the only thing I can think about, because you looked at me like I was human, not a monster. Because when I touch you, I remember what it feels like to want something that isn't built on fear or power or obligation. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. Then his phone buzzed, and buzzed again. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, the moment was gone, locked behind walls of control. Victor will drive you home, he said, his voice formal now, distant. Thank you for coming tonight, for being kind to Alexei, for... He stopped, shook his head. Thank you. He was dismissing me, sending me away before this, whatever this was, could go any further. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt something close to devastation. Victor appeared again, as if summoned by telepathy. I followed him out of the study, down the hallway, past Galena, who pressed a small package into my hands, leftover cake, dear, and out into the cold night air. The Rolls-Royce waited, warm and safe and ready to take me back to my real life. I looked back at the house once before getting in. Dmitri stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm interior light, watching me leave. Even from this distance, I could feel the weight of his gaze. I'd come here thinking I was just thanking a grateful father, accepting a simple dinner invitation. I was leaving knowing I'd stepped into something far more complicated, far more dangerous. And God help me, I wanted to step even deeper. 3 days passed like a fever dream. I cashed the check, not because I'd changed my mind about accepting payment, but because my landlord had started leaving eviction notices on my door, and pride didn't keep a roof over my head. The bank teller's eyes had widened when she saw the amount, then narrowed with suspicion until she verified the check was legitimate. I'd walked out with a cashier's check for $50,000 burning in my purse like stolen goods. I paid my rent for the next year in advance, bought new shoes, actual comfortable ones meant for standing all day, got my apartment's heater fixed, put the rest in a savings account, and tried not to think about where the money had come from, or the man who'd signed it. Tried and failed. Dmitri Konstantin haunted my thoughts. The way he'd looked at me in his study, the confession that had spilled from his lips before duty pulled him away. You've been the only thing I can think about. The words played on repeat in my mind during every quiet moment, which was dangerous because waitressing gave you a lot of quiet moments between orders. I kept expecting something, another visit from Galena, a phone call, Victor showing up at the diner, but there was nothing, just silence, and the ghost of his touch on my face, and the memory of dark eyes that had looked at me like I mattered. Maybe that was for the best. Maybe he'd realized the danger of getting too close to someone from my world. Someone who couldn't understand his life. Maybe I was just a brief fascination, made interesting only by the circumstances of how we'd met. The thought hurt more than it should have. On the 4th day, I was wiping down tables during the lunch rush, when Marge touched my shoulder. Sophia, you have a visitor. Says it's important. I looked up to see a young woman standing near the entrance, mid-20s, beautiful in that effortless way that came from good genes and expensive maintenance. She wore designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves. Everything about her screamed money and privilege. She was watching me with barely concealed hostility. Can I help you? I asked, setting down my rag. You're Sophia Torres. It wasn't a question. Her accent was American, but polished, the kind you got from private schools. The waitress who saved Alexei Konstantin. Warning bells went off in my head. Who are you? Elena Volkov, Dmitri's fiancée. She said it like she was claiming territory, marking boundaries. We need to talk, privately. My heart stuttered. Fiancé. Of course he had a fiancé. Men like Dmitri Konstantin didn't stay single. They had women who matched their status, their wealth, their world. Women like this polished creature in front of me, not waitresses with holes in their shoes. "I'm working," I said, hating how my voice sounded, small, defensive. "Take a break." Elena's smile was cold. "I promise this won't take long." Marge was watching from behind the counter, her expression worried. I gave her a small nod, "I'm okay," and led Elena to the farthest booth, away from other customers. She slid in across from me, her designer bag settling on the seat with a soft thump that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to cost. Up close, she was even more beautiful. Flawless skin, green eyes that assessed me with clinical precision. "I'll get straight to the point," Elena said. "Dimitri is grateful for what you did. We all are, but your involvement with our family ends now." "I'm not involved with your family," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saved a child's life, that's all." "Is it?" Elena leaned forward, and I saw the steel beneath the beauty. "Then why did Dimitri invite you to our home? Why did he have dinner with you and Alexei? Why has he been distracted for days, making uncharacteristic mistakes because his mind is elsewhere?" Each question hit like a small blade. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. It doesn't suit you." Elena's voice dropped lower, more intense. "I know you've cashed his check. I know you're probably already imagining what it would be like to be with a man like him, to have access to his money, his power. But let me make something very clear. Dimitri and I have been together for 3 years. We're getting married in 6 months. Our families have been aligned for generations. What you think happened between you was just gratitude mixed with emotion over Alexei's accident. Nothing more." "I never said anything happened between us," I managed, but my face was burning. "You didn't have to. I can see it written all over you." Elena's smile was pitying now, which was worse than the hostility. "You're not the first woman to develop feelings for him, and you won't be the last. Dimitri is magnetic, powerful, protective. Exactly the kind of man women like you dream about. But he belongs to a world you'll never understand, with rules you can't even imagine. And more importantly, he belongs to me." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos, then turned the screen toward me. Images of her and Dimitri. At galas, at restaurants, her hand on his arm, his hand on her waist. In one photo, they were dancing, and she was looking up at him with obvious adoration. In another, they were at what looked like a family gathering, Alexei sitting on Dimitri's lap, while Elena stood behind them, her hand possessive on Dimitri's shoulder. A family. They looked like a family. "We have a life together," Elena continued, putting her phone away. "A future planned. Children we're going to have. Alexei adores me. I've been in his life since he was 4 years old. His mother died when he was a baby, and I've been the closest thing to a mother he's known." Each word was a precision strike, designed to hurt. And it was working. "So here's what's going to happen," Elena said, her voice hardening. "You're going to stay away from Dimitri and Alexei. No more dinners, no more visits. If he contacts you, you'll politely decline. You'll go back to your life, and we'll go back to ours, and in return, you get to keep the money and walk away unharmed." "Unharmed?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check." Elena stood, smoothing down her sweater. "Dimitri is a dangerous man, Sophia. The people in his world don't play by normal rules. You saved his son, which buys you some protection, but that protection only extends so far. Cross certain lines, and even gratitude won't save you." She pulled out a business card, expensive stock, embossed lettering, and set it on the table. "My number. If he contacts you, call me. I'll handle it. Consider this conversation a courtesy, one woman to another. I could have made this much uglier." Then she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and the wreckage of something I hadn't even realized I'd been hoping for. I sat in that booth for 20 minutes after she left, staring at her business card, feeling stupid and small and naive. Of course Dimitri had a fiancé. Of course that moment in his study had meant nothing. He was probably expert at making women feel special, at making them believe they were different, unique. I'd been a fool. When I finally stood up, my legs felt unsteady, Marge appeared at my elbow, her face concerned. "You okay, honey?" "Fine," I lied. "Just a misunderstanding." But that night, alone in my apartment, I let myself cry. For the fantasy I'd built in my head. For the way Dimitri had looked at me like I mattered. For the brief moment when I'd felt seen instead of invisible. It had all been an illusion, a trick of circumstance and gratitude. I needed to forget him. Move on. Go back to my real life. Except my real life had already been irrevocably changed. 2 days later, I was leaving the diner after the late shift when I noticed the car, a black Mercedes, parked across the street, its engine running. I'd seen enough movies to know what it meant, but I was too tired and heartbroken to care about danger. The back door opened, and Victor stepped out. "Miss Torres, get in the car." "I'm not interested," I said, walking faster toward the bus stop. He matched my pace easily, his large frame somehow both threatening and protective. "Mr. Constantine needs to see you. It's urgent. Tell Mr. Constantine I'm busy. Tell him I got his message loud and clear from his fiancée." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "He doesn't know Elena spoke to you." I stopped walking. "What?" "Elena doesn't speak for Mr. Constantine. She speaks for herself and for her family's interests." Victor's voice was low, careful. "Please, Miss Torres, just come. If you still want to leave after hearing what he has to say, I'll drive you home myself, and you'll never hear from us again." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to protect what was left of my dignity. But there was something in Victor's voice, urgency, almost pleading, that made me hesitate. "Fine," I said. "But this is the last time." The drive was longer this time, heading in a different direction, not toward Dimitri's home, but into the industrial district where warehouses and factories sat dark and silent. My earlier bravado faded as Victor pulled up to a nondescript building, its windows covered, its exterior giving no hint of what lay inside. "Where are we?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. "Somewhere private, where we won't be disturbed." Victor got out and opened my door. "Mr. Constantine is waiting inside." "You're safe, Miss Torres. I give you my word." I'd learned enough about Dimitri's world to know that Victor's word actually meant something. He was loyal, honorable in his own way. If he said I was safe, I probably was. Probably. The interior of the warehouse had been converted into something unexpected. A boxing gym. Heavy bags hung from chains. A ring dominated the center. Weights and equipment lined the walls. The air smelled of sweat and leather and determination. And in the ring, shirtless and glistening with perspiration, was Dimitri Constantine. He was hitting a heavy bag with controlled fury, each punch precise and powerful. I could see the play of muscles across his back and shoulders, the scars that marked his skin, some old and faded, others more recent. This was a man who'd fought, who'd bled, who'd survived things that would have destroyed softer people. He hit the bag one more time, then stopped, his chest heaving. He knew I was there. I could tell by the way his shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around immediately. "Victor, leave us," he said, his voice rough. Victor hesitated. "Sir, now." The door closed behind Victor, and I was alone with Dimitri in this cavernous space. Slowly, he turned to face me, and the intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. He looked different here, rawer, more dangerous. The polished businessman, the controlled father, those were masks. This was something closer to his truth. "Elena came to see you," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "And she told you to stay away from me, that we're engaged, that I belong to her." He grabbed a towel, wiping sweat from his face and chest, but his eyes never left mine. "What else did she say?" "That I'm a fool for thinking our dinner meant anything. That you were just grateful, emotional. That I should take the money and disappear from your life." My voice was steadier than I felt. Was she wrong? Dimitri threw the towel aside and climbed out of the ring with lethal grace. He moved toward me, and I forced myself to stand still even as every instinct screamed at me to run, not from fear, from self-preservation, because the way he was looking at me was going to destroy me. "Elena Volkov is many things," he said, stopping just inches from me. "Beautiful, intelligent, connected to powerful families. Our fathers arranged our engagement years ago. a strategic alliance to strengthen business ties. She's been patient, waiting for me to set a date, playing the role of devoted fiancé. So she was telling the truth. The words tasted bitter. She was telling her truth, not mine. His hand came up, fingers grazing my jaw with the gentleness that contrasted so sharply with the violence I'd just witnessed. I never agreed to marry her, Sophia. I never proposed, never gave her a ring, never made promises I had no intention of keeping. Our families assumed, arranged, decided, but I didn't. Then why does she think? Because I allowed it. Because refusing outright would have meant war between our families, and I had bigger problems to deal with. Because it was easier to let people believe what they wanted than to fight about it. His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and I couldn't stop the shiver that ran through me. Until you. Me? It came out as barely a whisper. From the moment you saved Alexei, everything changed. I couldn't stop thinking about you, this woman who gave me back my son without expecting anything in return. Who looked at me without fear, without calculation, just honestly. Who cried on a cold sidewalk because you cared whether a stranger's child lived or died. He was so close now I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the rapid pulse at his throat. Do you know what you've done to me, Sophia Torres? You've made me want things I thought I'd given up on. Made me believe that maybe I could have something real. Something not built on alliances and strategy and power plays. I'm a waitress, I said, even as I leaned into his touch. I live in a studio apartment in the worst part of town. I have nothing to offer you. You have everything. His other hand cupped my face now, holding me like I was infinitely precious. You're the first person in years who's made me feel human instead of like a weapon everyone wants to point in their preferred direction. Elena said. I don't care what Elena said. His voice dropped to something almost feral. She doesn't get to decide what I want. She doesn't own me, no matter what our families arranged, and she sure as hell doesn't get to drive you away by making you think you mean nothing to me. Do I? I needed to hear it, needed him to say it clearly. Mean something to you? You terrify me, he admitted, his forehead dropping to rest against mine. Because you make me want to be better than what I am. Because every time I see you, I want to keep you. Protect you, claim you as mine in a way that's probably unhealthy and definitely dangerous. Because for the first time in my life, I'm willing to start a war over a woman. His lips were so close to mine, his breath warm against my skin. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm imagining this connection between us. Tell me you want me to take you home and never contact you again. Tell me, Sophia, and I'll let you go. I should have said it. Should have protected myself, walked away, chosen safety over this terrifying, impossible thing pulling us together. Instead, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. The world exploded. His arms came around me immediately, pulling me flush against his body, one hand fisting in my hair while the other pressed against my lower back. The kiss was hungry, desperate, months of restraint shattering in an instant. He tasted like mint and danger, and promises that would probably destroy me. And I didn't care. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were almost black with desire. You need to understand something, he said, his voice rough. If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. I'm not a good man, Sophia. I've done things that would make you run screaming. I have enemies who would love to use you against me. My world is violent and unforgiving, and once you're part of it, there's no safe way out. I know. Do you? His hand tightened in my hair, not quite painful, but possessive. Because Elena was right about one thing. I am dangerous. Not just to my enemies, but to everyone close to me. Alexei's mother died because of me. Because someone wanted to hurt me and she was the easiest target. I couldn't protect her. What makes you think I could protect you? The confession cracked something open in him, and I saw the guilt, the fear he kept buried under all that control. Maybe I don't need protecting, I said softly. Maybe I need someone who sees me as strong enough to make my own choices, even dangerous ones. He studied my face for a long moment, then pulled back slightly. Elena will make your life hell. Her family will push back. The people in my organization who support the alliance will see you as a threat. And I—" He paused, his jaw tight. "I will be demanding, possessive, probably suffocating. I've never been good at sharing what's mine." "I'm not yours yet," I pointed out, even though my heart was racing at the claim in his words. His smile was dangerous, predatory. "Yes, you are. You have been since the moment your hands pressed against my son's chest and brought him back to life. I just didn't want to admit it, because admitting it meant accepting that I'd found something worth fighting for. Worth killing for. The casual way he said it should have frightened me. Instead, it sent heat pooling in my stomach. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" He pulled me back against him, his mouth finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. "Now I break an engagement that never should have existed. Now I deal with the consequences. And there will be consequences. Now I make it very clear to everyone in my world that you're under my protection, that touching you means declaring war on me." He pulled back to look at me, and the intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming. "And now, Sofia Torres, I'm going to make you mine in every way that matters. Unless you want to run." I should have run. Should have chosen safety, normalcy, a life that didn't involve mob bosses and possessive declarations and kisses that felt like falling off a cliff. Instead, I wrapped my arms around his neck and whispered, "I'm not running." His answering smile was fierce, triumphant, and utterly terrifying. And then he kissed me again, and I stopped thinking altogether. The next 3 weeks were a hurricane. Dimitri didn't waste time with subtlety. The morning after our night in the warehouse, where we'd talked until dawn, kissing between confessions, learning each other's scars, he called Elena and ended their arrangement. I wasn't there for the conversation, but Victor told me later that it had been brutal. Elena had screamed, threatened, promised that her family would retaliate. Dimitri had been unmoved. He told her that some things were worth going to war over, Victor said. Something like respect in his voice as he drove me home that morning, and that you were one of them. The fallout was immediate and vicious. Elena's family, the Volkovs, were old-money Russian aristocracy who'd rebuilt their empire in America through legitimate business fronts and not-so-legitimate backroom deals. They'd been counting on the alliance with the Constantines to expand their territory, and Dimitri's rejection was a public humiliation they couldn't ignore. Within days, I had security. Not just Victor, but a rotating team of 3 men who followed me everywhere, to work, to the grocery store. Even sitting in the diner during my shifts, Marge nearly had a heart attack the first time they showed up, but Dimitri called her personally and explained that my safety was non-negotiable. "Those men stay, or Sofia doesn't work here anymore," he'd told her, his tone brooking no argument. "Your choice." Marge had taken one look at my face, seeing something there I hadn't wanted to admit, and agreed. The threat started on day 4. A brick through my apartment window with a note. "Stay away from what doesn't belong to you." Dead flowers left at the diner's entrance. Anonymous calls to my phone with nothing but breathing on the other end. Dimitri's response was swift and terrifying. 2 of the Volkovs' warehouses burned down in mysterious fires. 3 of their key distributors suddenly decided to switch allegiances. The message was clear. Touch what's mine, and I'll destroy everything you've built. I should have been horrified by the violence done in my name. Instead, some dark part of me felt protected, claimed, worth fighting for. "You're insane," I told Dimitri one night, standing in his study while he reviewed reports from his men. "Starting a war over a waitress you barely know." He looked up from the papers, his dark eyes intense. "I know everything about you, Sofia. I know you put yourself through community college while working 3 jobs. I know your mother died of cancer when you were 15, and you've been alone ever since. I know you send money to St. Mary's Children's Hospital every month even though you can barely afford it, because a nurse there was kind to your mother in her final days." My breath caught. "How—" "I made it my business to know." He stood, moving around the desk toward me with that predatory grace that made my pulse race. "And I know that you're brave enough to save a dying child without hesitation, stubborn enough to refuse payment for doing the right thing, and strong enough to walk into my world with your eyes open despite knowing how dangerous it is." His hands cupped my face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. "So no, I'm not starting a war over a waitress I barely know. I'm starting a war over the woman who makes me believe I could be more than just a monster in an expensive suit. The woman I'm falling in love with. The confession stole my breath. Dimitri. I know it's too soon. I know you're not ready to hear it. His thumb brushed across my lips. But I've never been patient about getting what I want. And I want you. All of you. Your smiles and your sharp tongue and your ridiculous nobility. Your past and your present and whatever future you'll let me have. You're right, I whispered. It is too soon. This is crazy. We've known each other for less than a month. And yet here you are, in my home, letting me start wars for you, kissing me like you're drowning and I'm air. His smile was dark, knowing. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me this is just gratitude or fascination or some temporary insanity that will pass. I couldn't. Because despite the insanity, despite the danger, despite every logical reason to run, I was falling too. Falling for the way he was with Alexei, patient and loving and fiercely protective. Falling for the moments of vulnerability he showed only to me, the confessions whispered in the dark. Falling for the man beneath the monster, the one who looked at me like I was his salvation. I feel it, I admitted. God help me. I feel it too. His kiss was possessive, claiming, full of dark promise. And I kissed him back with equal hunger, knowing I was signing myself over to something beautiful and terrible and completely irreversible. The war with the Volkovs escalated over the next 2 weeks. More property damage on both sides. 2 of Dimitri's men ended up in the hospital, one with a broken arm, another with a concussion. The violence was controlled, strategic, each move designed to apply pressure without triggering all-out bloodshed. But everyone knew it couldn't last. It has to end, Galina told me one afternoon, her usually composed face drawn with worry. We were in Dimitri's kitchen while Alexei was at school, and she was teaching me to make pelmeni, Russian dumplings that were apparently Dimitri's favorite. The other families are getting nervous. They're pressuring both sides to resolve this before it spirals into something that affects everyone's business. What does that mean? I asked, my hands stilling over the dough. It means there will be a meeting, a negotiation. The Volkovs will demand compensation for the broken engagement, for the public humiliation. She paused, choosing her words carefully. They may demand you. Ice flooded my veins. What? Not to hurt you. Even the Volkovs aren't stupid enough to murder someone under Dimitri's protection. But they could demand you leave the city. Stay away from him. Agree to never see him or Alexei again. She covered my flour-dusted hands with her own. And if you refuse, if Dimitri refuses, the violence will escalate. People will die. Maybe even innocent people caught in the crossfire. So I'm the problem. The words tasted bitter. If I just left, this would all go away. If you left, Dimitri would burn the city down looking for you. Galina's voice was gentle but firm. Don't mistake this for something you can fix by sacrificing yourself. He won't let you go. And honestly, I don't think you want to go either. She was right. Despite everything, the danger, the violence, the impossible complications, I didn't want to leave. I'd found something here, something I'd been searching for my whole life without knowing it. A home. A family. A man who looked at me like I was his entire world. The meeting happened 3 days later. Dimitri didn't want me there, but I insisted. This is about me, I argued. I deserve to be part of the conversation. We compromised. I would attend, but remain silent, letting Dimitri and his advisors handle the negotiations. Victor and 2 other guards would stay close, and at the first sign of real danger, they'd get me out. The meeting took place in neutral territory, a private room in an upscale restaurant owned by one of the old Italian families who'd been mediating the conflict. The room was elegant, windowless, with a long table and chairs that probably cost more than a car. The Volkovs arrived first. Elena looked stunning in a blood-red dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her face a mask of cold fury. Her father was with her, Mikhail Volkov, silver-haired and distinguished, with eyes like chips of ice. 2 bodyguards flanked them. Then Dimitri arrived, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He wore a black suit that made him look like death in designer clothing, his face utterly expressionless. I sat beside him, Victor standing behind my chair like a sentinel. The mediator, an elderly Italian man named Don Caruso, opened the proceedings. We're here to resolve the dispute between the Konstantin and Volkov families regarding the broken engagement and subsequent misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Mikhail's voice was harsh with accent and anger. My daughter was publicly humiliated. Agreements between our families were broken. My businesses have been attacked. This is not a misunderstanding. It's an act of war. An engagement I never agreed to was used to manipulate business arrangements I never approved, Dmitri said coldly. Your daughter claimed a position in my life that was never offered. When I corrected the misconception, you responded with threats against someone under my protection. So yes, Mikhail, there's been an act of war, but you fired the first shot. Mikhail's face reddened. That waitress has a name. Dmitri's voice dropped to something dangerous. Use it respectfully or we're done here. The tension was suffocating. Elena was staring at me with undisguised hatred, while her father looked like he wanted to leap across the table. Don Caruso raised his hands placatingly. Gentlemen, please, we're here to find a solution that satisfies both parties. He looked at Mikhail. What compensation would the Volkov family find acceptable? Mikhail leaned back, his expression calculating. Return what was promised. Marry my daughter. Unite our families as was always intended. The girl... He caught himself at Dmitri's expression. Sophia can be compensated generously and relocated. Everyone walks away satisfied. No. Dmitri's answer was flat, final. Then we continue as we have been, Mikhail said coldly. And we escalate. My family has resources you can't imagine, Konstantin. We'll make this so costly, so bloody, that you'll wish you'd taken the deal. Before you make more threats you can't follow through on, Dmitri said, his voice deadly calm. Let me tell you what I know. He pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Your operation has a leak, Mikhail. Someone high up in your organization has been feeding information to the FBI for 6 months. Names, dates, transactions, everything they need to bring RICO charges against your entire family. Mikhail's face went white. Elena grabbed the folder, flipping through it, her hands shaking. I saw her face change as she read, saw the moment she realized the information was real. Where did you get this? Mikhail's voice was barely controlled. Does it matter? Dmitri leaned forward. What matters is that I have copies. Many copies. And if anything happens to Sophia, if she's threatened or harmed or even frightened by someone connected to your family, every one of those copies goes to the FBI, the IRS, and every major newspaper in the country. Your empire will be destroyed in a week. You're bluffing. But Mikhail's voice lacked conviction. Am I? Dmitri's smile was cold. Test me. Please. Give me a reason to burn your world down. The silence stretched, heavy with threat and calculation. Finally, Don Caruso spoke. Perhaps there's a middle ground, Mr. Konstantin. Would you be willing to offer some form of compensation to smooth over the social difficulties the broken engagement has caused? Dmitri looked at me, his expression softening slightly, then back at the Volkovs. I'll pay the Volkov family $2 million for any business disruptions caused by the situation. In exchange, they'll publicly announce that the engagement was ended by mutual agreement, with no hard feelings on either side. Elena will be presented as the one who ended it, protecting her reputation. And most importantly, Sophia Torres becomes completely off-limits. No threats, no intimidation, no contact. She's under my protection permanently. 3 million, Mikhail countered. 2.5, and I don't release the FBI information for 5 years, giving you time to clean up your operation. Dmitri's voice was firm. Final offer. I watched the calculation happen in Mikhail's eyes. The cost of continued war versus the cost of accepting terms. Finally, he nodded stiffly. Agreed. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice shaking with rage as she looked at Dmitri. She's nothing. A nobody. She'll never fit into your world, never understand what you need, never be able to give you what I could have. You're wrong. Dmitri said, not unkindly. She's everything, and that's something you'll never understand. Elena's face crumpled for just a moment, not with anger, but with genuine hurt. Then the mask was back, cold and perfect. She walked out without another word, her father and bodyguards following. When they were gone, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Dimitri's hand found mine under the table, squeezed gently. "It's over," I asked. "It's over," he confirmed. "You're safe. We're safe." Don Caruso smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him. "Young love," he said, shaking his head. "Always causing trouble, but also always worth it, eh?" The aftermath was surprisingly quiet. The Volkovs kept their word. Within a week, society pages were reporting that Elena had ended the engagement amicably, that she was focusing on her own business ventures, that there were no hard feelings. The violence stopped. The threats disappeared. Life, impossibly, returned to something almost normal. I still worked at the diner. Dmitri hated it, wanted me to quit, but I refused to give up that part of my independence. We compromised. I cut back my hours and took night classes at the community college, working toward the degree I'd always wanted. Dmitri paid for it, and before I could argue, he pointed out that he'd spend more than that on a single business dinner, so I might as well let him invest in my education. Alexei became a fixture in my life. I'd pick him up from school twice a week, help with homework, take him to the park. He called me Sophia, but sometimes when he was tired or happy, it became Sophie, said with such affection that my heart ached. And Dmitri. Dmitri was everything he'd promised and more. Demanding, yes, possessive and protective to the point of suffocation sometimes, but also tender in ways that surprised me. Patient with my fears and insecurities about his world, fiercely proud of every small accomplishment in my classes. 6 months after the meeting with the Volkovs, on a warm summer evening, Dmitri took me back to the warehouse where we'd first kissed, but it was transformed now. Lights strung from the ceiling, a table set for two in the center of the boxing ring, candles everywhere. "What is this?" I asked, laughing as he led me inside. "This is where you stopped running from me," he said, pulling me close. "Where you chose me despite every reason not to." I wanted to celebrate that moment because it changed my life. We ate dinner in the ring where he'd once hit bags with controlled fury, where I'd once told him I wasn't running. The food was catered from the best restaurant in the city. The wine probably cost more than I used to make in a month, but what made it perfect was the way Dmitri looked at me, like I was his entire world. After dinner, as we stood in the center of the ring, he pulled out a small box. My heart stopped. "I know it's fast," he said, opening it to reveal a ring, elegant, beautiful, with a diamond that caught the candlelight. "I know you might not be ready, but I've never been good at patience, and I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He took my hand, his dark eyes intense and vulnerable. "Sophia Torres, you saved my son's life, and in doing so, you saved mine too. You make me believe I can be more than what I was made to be. You make me want to be better, to build something good in all this darkness. I love you, completely, dangerously, permanently. Marry me. Be my wife, Alexei's mother, my partner in everything. Help me build something worth fighting for." Tears streamed down my face. Happy tears. Overwhelmed tears. Tears for the girl I'd been who never thought she'd have this. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ring slid onto my finger perfectly, like it had been made for me, which, knowing Dmitri, it probably had been. He kissed me then, deep and claiming and full of promise. And in that warehouse where we'd first admitted what was between us, I felt the last pieces of my careful, invisible life fall away, replaced by something terrifying and beautiful, and completely mine. "I love you too," I whispered against his lips, "my dangerous, impossible, perfect man." His smile was fierce, triumphant. "Mine," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Yours," I agreed, "always." We married 3 months later in a small ceremony at Dmitri's home, just family and close friends. Alexei was the ring bearer, taking his job so seriously that everyone cried watching him. Galina cried. Victor, stoic, Scarred Victor got suspiciously misty-eyed. Even Marge came, dressed in her finest, and looking proud enough to burst. As I stood at the altar looking into Dimitri's eyes, promising forever to a man I'd known less than a year, I thought about the night this all started. The cold sidewalk, the dying child, the desperate rhythm of CPR. The moment that had changed everything. I'd gone to work that night expecting nothing more than sore feet and small tips. I'd missed work to save a life, never imagining it would lead to this. To love. To family. To a man who'd burned the world down to keep me safe. Dimitri's hand squeezed mine as the officiant pronounced us married, and when he kissed me, I tasted his love, his promise, his absolute certainty that we were meant for this. Mrs. Constantine, he whispered against my lips, and my heart soared. Mr. Constantine, I whispered back, smiling through happy tears. Our life wouldn't be normal. There would always be danger, always be the weight of his world pressing in. But we'd face it together, building something good in the darkness, proving that love could bloom even in the most unlikely places. And as Alexei crashed into both of us, wrapping his small arms around our legs and shouting, "We're a real family now," I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. The waitress who'd saved a life had found one worth living. And the dangerous man who'd thought he was beyond redemption had found his salvation in a woman who'd seen past the monster to the man beneath. We were home,